And I'd love to bring Hector on up with me to dive into our next segment.
Hey,
how's it going?
Good. Ruth Pupsberg.
Yes, Ruth Pupsberg. I will never get over it.
That is fantastic. Yeah, that's amazing. Real quick, Jason, a couple of people mentioned this energy. I'm a newcomer to Canada. My first week here, it's about 4 years ago. I went to a TechTO. Jason brought that same energy on person, but on like a hoverboard.
The hoverboard and the megaphone, yeah.
Like, it's just amazing. I was hooked ever since. So
good. And we do miss being at RBC Water Park Place. Hopefully we'll be back in person, all 1,000 of you that we used to bring out every month, close to the end of this year when it's safe. And hopefully we'll have you out then, Hector, as well. But we do have you here virtually, joining us from the safety of our own homes, and excited to share some advice for job seekers. And we have a lot of them in the audience tonight. But before you do that, I'd love to learn a little bit about you in your own words and what you do at RBC.
Yeah, sure. Arnold mentioned like a 25-year career. I think I'm about the same range, although I say about 20 years. I am not a technologist. I've been on the design side. I will say that in the early days, I was doing some HTML 1.0 programming, usually on a WYSIWYG tool. And then I was doing action scripting in Macromedia Flash. If that resonates with anyone, that was before Adobe.
Yeah, let us know in chat. Is this hitting with anyone?
Yeah, pretty bad stuff. That might be the first lesson, at least for me, was recognize what you're really mediocre at, and maybe pick something where you're not that. So anyway, that's for me. So let me give you a little bit more about myself and maybe Ventures. We describe RBC Ventures as going beyond banking to deliver value for consumers. We use that term deliberately. It's not just for RBC clients. It's not just for Canadians. We're actually starting businesses. We call them ventures, but they're equivalent of like startups for any number of people out there. The way I think about it is that there's about 50,000+ people that have created a really great bank in RBC, where we don't have to do that. We can go explore and discover other opportunities. It's through partnerships that we do it. It's through acquisitions or investment plays where there's a commercial play for RBC or ventures. But the majority of ventures we have are homegrown. Entrepreneurs on their own, what we call Imagineers, coming up with ideas, pitching them, and then giving the runway to go build your idea, which is pretty cool. So.
And if any of the folks are here, remember from real in-person days at RBC Water Park Place, we used to have the ventures actually come out and do an announcement, and we used to have them like showcase what they were doing. There was a TTC app that I had like front page on my phone for years that was an RBC venture. So if you've been around for a long time, the ventures team has been part of our family for years and years, and you've actually probably connected with a lot of them if you've come to our in-person events, obviously pre-COVID. But I want to dive right in. And when we chatted beforehand, you mentioned that there are some things that candidates take for granted that really have an impact on hiring managers. And we have a lot of candidates in the audience tonight. Can you make some examples and kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, there's a couple of things I'll throw out there. Oftentimes, applying is not enough. I was actually talking to Meg, the CEO of Prepped, and that there's this sort of spray and pray behavior that we oftentimes see. That approach won't necessarily work. I alone, for any one rec that I have out there, job posting I have out there, I can get a couple of hundred applicants, and so it's difficult. I would suggest you take multiple strategies. Of course, apply, but find connections that you have that could be a referral. Do anything that can potentially be an inroad there. Do your homework. I'm surprised by, quite candidly, the number of candidates that I speak with that haven't read through the job posting enough, haven't reviewed the the details about ventures or a venture Prepped, or the one you described, which is Rocket Man, and many others that we have please do your homework. It's not a ton that we ask, but the more you know, the more insightful your questions there'll be, the more that I know you've put some thought into this. I would also suggest that you are also interviewing, and recognize that part of it, especially for a tech group. There are some highly sought after talent on this call. And so you sort of have your pick, but please do your homework around the manager, around the organization, the culture, to make sure that it is a fit for you. You should absolutely take your time to do that. I was also, one last thing out there, speaking with Dave Simons, our CTO of RBC Ventures, and he described understanding the value exchange. That's the term he looks, which was truly recognize the value that you bring to bear and understand in context to what that organization cares about, where does that value that you bring lie in that organization? To sort of understand, is this going to be a place that I want to be at? Do they appreciate what I do? Is there going to be a career mobility here for me? So some
And
things I think about.
I think you touched on a lot of really interesting things, like definitely reading the job ad. I come from a technical recruitment background, and the amount of people that said the wrong tech stack on the interview because they spray and prayed and forgot which one they were interviewing. Especially with companies like RBC. RBC Ventures does a lot of really cool stuff that the traditional sort of RBC doesn't do, and making sure you spend the time looking at that. But I want to dig in on a little bit of like the reaching out part and how you can do more. It's a very divisive thing to do, but do you like a cold outreach from LinkedIn? Do you avoid it? Like, do those sort of things matter to you?
I don't mind it. Although I would suggest if you're doing it on LinkedIn, don't necessarily expect a reply. Just consider that maybe one tactic, right? Apply for the position, talk to a connection or a secondary connection that may work there. Reach out to the hiring manager if you find out. Try a number of tactics. Make it known that you have a keen interest in the organization and the role, and certainly do that. But no, I don't mind it at all personally. I would say if you're doing that, provide some specificity. What specific job are you looking for? What specific skills do you have that you think aligns, or work history that aligns to that particular role? And even again, in a sort of random note on LinkedIn, you can share that you've done a little bit of homework. Hey, I've seen your talk here, or I know you've done this recently in the news. Those things are super helpful.
Yeah, and they make it feel like it's not, again, that spray and pray, which you mentioned earlier. It doesn't feel like you copy pasted this to every hiring manager in the city, right?
Exactly. Right.
On the flip side of that, we do actually have a lot of hiring companies out tonight. What are some common mistakes hiring managers make in this process?
Yeah, I can speak to several on my own. Response time, I think that's a really big issue. Again, I mentioned like a number of applicants, how you respond during a recruiting or hiring, from a screening call to a response email to maybe the instructions you give someone that you're casing, right? All that is speaking to the due diligence that you do as an organization, the follow-through that you provide, the courtesy you would give any individual. I think it speaks to your brand as a hiring manager and the organization that you belong to. And so please be responsive. I would also say, give the person the courtesy of letting you know what's going on. Hey, this is, mid-December. I'm going to be out for the next 2 weeks. Or we've just started the application process. We just posted you. The very first person I speak with. Understand this is going to be a lengthy journey. I think a little bit of that is a courtesy that you can afford any candidate. A couple of other things I would throw out there. One is the behavioral side, the assessment of maybe your best understanding of that person's EQ, the understanding how they might handle ambiguity, the tough conversations when they've had to push back, some sense of their, oftentimes their integrity, how they approach things. It's super critical. I've found I've really found that we've hired someone that are missing a major technical skill gap. It is often gaps, or at least more often, in my opinion, it's one of these softer behavioral gaps that becomes there's a rub here that's a bit of a problem. And so I would suggest hiring managers probe more on the behavioral side for sure.
And building on that, I definitely recommend any hiring managers spend time looking into resources into behavioral interviewing, because I feel like I've been in a lot of interviews where folks try and do it, and it just ends up me sort of, or candidates sort of dancing around answers that they think the hiring manager wants, which again leads to those not the greatest hires. So if you are a hiring manager here, I highly recommend doing some research on behavioral interviewing, because it can save you, like you said, a lot of bad either culture 100%. Fits or those soft skills that are missing in someone. Fantastic. So kind of bridging those two, can you give us an example of a candidate that really stood out and what made their interview special, either from a hiring manager perspective or something the candidate did?
Yeah, I was just thinking about this last night. There was a candidate. So the way the story I heard it, this was early days in Ventures. So think maybe 40 of us as part of this team 3-4 years ago. Came to a TechTO event where they heard about Ventures. And there was 2 of them that just sort of showed up to our floor, to our lobby, really interested in the organization. Well, I would suggest not doing that now. 1, because no one's in the office. 2, we've gotten better at like our, how we deal with security there. But it was interesting that these 2 individuals were just so passionate. They had done a ton of homework. They were bold enough to just come there and say, I just want to talk to someone here. It was quite impressive. And then, oh, by the way, when we did talk to them, they had the background. They did their homework. They were highly skilled. Long story short, that person is director of CX strategy for me. Patrick Noonan has been one of the best leaders that I've hired in my career. But it was this idea of, okay, there's an application, there's a LinkedIn reach out, there's the TechTO event where I'm going to network with that person that I'm interested in, and sometimes just show up. That for me was quite proactive. So it was kind of interesting. Stands out for sure.
I love that. And Alex from our team kind of summed that up as like, be bold and put yourself out there, which I think is can be scary in the job hiring or in the job seeking process for sure. But
100%.
Obviously it pays off. We are getting close on time. So there's 2 more questions I want to get to. And one, I'm going to take Jacqueline's question from the audience and spin it a little. But we have a lot of folks here that are transitioning from traditional industries into tech or are moving their way into tech from Jacqueline's case, the pharmacist or other industries. Do you have any advice for those kinds of folks getting into the tech or digital world?
Yeah, it's difficult because there is a bit of a leap of faith that you have to make in the individual. And I guess one thing I would say there is that, at least in my career, the majority of the roles I've gotten have been based upon a connection I've made, right? The relationship that I've had, that I've established with that individual, or that individual that's going to be my advocate and referral to someone who doesn't know me. And when you are making that big of a pivot, I would suggest that you might have to lean on that network, someone who has sort of a base trust in you, a foundation that they believe in the individual, even if there's a skill set gap. Skill set gaps are definitely things that are teachable. We all learn, that you all can build. But that is a bit of a pivot. I would also say that individual, it needs to be absolutely transparent. Right? Obviously, I am making a shift. Here's what I'm doing to become educated in this new space that I'm entering. Here's the passion that I have for this particular area. Those are some of the things that I think about.
That's awesome. We see it all the time in tech, right? It's everyone is making the leap. And I think that you touched on, the power of network and being bold. And I think that's all great advice.
Can I throw out one other thing there real quick was, I talked to Adam Carter, the talent recruiter for all of tech. He mentioned that we've hired about 2,000 jobs in tech
Wow.
About half of those are internal referrals. And to
Wow.
some extent, it's what this is describing, a bit of a pivot, a career mobility change, a growth opportunity to try something new. Hopefully you're with an organization or you join an organization that encourages that is looking for your best interests, that are giving you some opportunities to stretch and grow. And that's nice. And when I spoke with them, that, hey, that type of effort is being done across the board, not just in ventures, but everywhere. So.
No, that's great advice. And it's an exciting time to pivot into tech and into the digital world, right? So it's definitely a leap of faith, but it's a leap of faith at a great time with, the COVID boom and all that sort of good stuff. But before we let you go, I just want him to plug where he is dropping his jobs, Jason. Then I'll hand it on back to you.
All right, that is bold. I'll let it go.
Yeah.
RBCventures.ca. That's really where you can go to find everything. There's a career section. You can find all of our jobs there.
And coincidentally in chat, just for you folks. Thanks so much, Hector. It's been fantastic.